I grew up in the 1950s in Florida. I was raised in segregation. We didn't know about segregation because our parents were always the shield. My grandmother said to me that I was all I would ever have. So I had to protect what I had. But the only one of the teachings that I took away with me is to treat other people the way you would have them treat you. The power of learning to forgive yourself. Don't take the incident forward. Take the wisdom that you learn about yourself forward. I learned how to acquire an elastic intelligence. That curiosity was the trigger because it's one of those revelations that change your life. And the therapist said to me, what makes you think that by playing by the rules, the world owes you success? That statement changed everything. Still makes me cry.
Wow.
I think about it to this day.
Welcome back to another episode of Coffee, Matcha, and Soul. I'm Sarvaj Bedian. I'm here with my close friends and co-host Guillermo Iban and Zaire Montez. And today we have a special guest with us, joining us for coffee or matcha, and we'll find out which soon. We have Alvin Hall, accomplished author, award-winning television and radio broadcaster, and a financial educator. Alvin, who lives and works in New York City, has hosted 2 podcast series, Driving the Green Book for Macmillan Podcasts, and Power, Lust, and Glory, The Story of Gold for Audible Original. Driving the Green Book received an inaugural Ambie Award for Best History Podcast of 2021. Alvin's recent book, Driving the Green Book, by the same name, was published in 2023, and he is currently writing a memoir of his childhood in the Florida Panhandle during the 1950s and 1960s. Alvin, thank you so much for being here. There's so much that we have to discuss, and we're really excited that you're hanging out with us. But before we get started, we have to find out, what is your drink of choice?
I'm drinking matcha.
All right. I think that's a win for me. Yes.
No coffee in the afternoon.
No coffee in the afternoon.
Okay,
you
next
have to
time we
settle.
bring you in the morning, so
Yeah,
we'll win over coffee.
So we can win. Yeah.
Great.
There's a fierce competition going on here.
So me and Alvin are good friends, so I know a little bit about you, and Guillermo and Zaire have recently met you, and so we're just super excited to dive into everything about your history. Could you tell us, Alvin, about growing up in Florida?
I grew up in the 1950s in Florida in a small village. It wasn't even a village, it was more like a community where my relatives had moved in the late 1800s from a plantation in Georgia. And it was so remote and so isolated and so rural. I remember that nights were really dark because there were no street lights. And it was always very quiet except for animals in the forest. But my relatives and all the other small Black communities in Wakulla County were very self-sufficient. So we grew our own food, we raised crops, we picked blackberries, we had pear trees, plum trees, peach trees. We walked to the Wakulla River to catch our own fish. Chickens were everywhere in everybody's yard, so eggs were abundant. I remember that we only basically went to town to buy dry goods, meal, sugar, flour, coffee, that type of stuff. But we grew almost everything. Now, we were very poor, but we didn't really know that, because there was always food and everybody around us was pretty much in the same socioeconomic condition, except perhaps Miss Maddie S. Williams, who was my first grade teacher. And she was my teacher from 1st through 3rd grade. But we all had great lives. We walked to each other's houses. Everybody knew each other. It was freedom. And we were protected. It's only been since I became an adult and started writing about things like the Great Migration and what happened to Black people, that I realized that our parents were really guardians in our lives. So we didn't know about segregation. We did not know about how rampant racism was during my growing up years, because our parents were always the shield for us. So we didn't know.
It was like living in a bubble in a way.
Yes, but I think Black parents during that time protected their children for as long as they
Of
could.
course.
They did not want children to be scarred by any of these incidents too early because they all knew
Yeah.
there would come a day when they could no longer protect them, when the child would be called that N word, somebody would say
Mm-hmm.
something horrible. So they wanted to protect their children for as long as they could, and they did.
For how long did you live in, like, at what age did you leave that community?
I left just before my 16th birthday to go to Yale Summer High School.
Wow. So from there to Yale.
Yes, at age 9, when my mother had my brother, whose name is Juan Durier, I knew I wanted to leave. There had been 3 of us very close together, born 3 years apart. Then my mother got involved in another relationship, and my mother proceeded to have 4 more children.
Wow.
By the time the 5th one was born, I was over it. Over it. So I told my mother that I would never have children. Never. And she said, but how do you know that? I said, I will never have children, and I'm going to leave here. And she said, oh, so Mr. Man, where do you think you're going and how are you going to get there? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And I stormed out. And that's what I did. I quietly and very deliberately had this whole interior life that my parents knew nothing about. And I planned my way out.
So you started researching. I mean, this was before
No.
internet. How did you find the school or the program that got you?
I always believed that if I did well in school, that an opportunity would come my way. I didn't know what that opportunity was, but I knew it was going to come my way.
Wow.
My grandmother used to always say to me, you have to learn how to freeze the water before you step on it. Now, that's funny because I grew up in Florida where there was almost no ice. So where did she get that idea from? But the freezing of the water was getting the education so that when the opportunity came along, I would be ready for that opportunity. And that's what happened. When integration occurred in the county, I was asked to apply to Project Upward Bound at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, now one of the most prestigious of the HBCUs, the historical Black colleges and universities in America. And there was a wonderful woman there named Miss Freddie Grooms running this program. And Miss Grooms, who is still alive today, saw something in me and said, you should apply to this other program. I know somebody at Yale, Joel Fleischman, who just died in Durham, North Carolina. And he'd started this program to give kids from small towns, but who scored well on standardized tests, an opportunity to come to Yale and study. And most people think it was an all-Black program. It was not. There were people there from all over the world. I met the first Puerto Rican people I ever met there, the first Asian people I ever met there. So it was a wonderful program. But I knew when I had that opportunity that I was going to take it. And I knew with everything in me that I might trip, but I was going to be able to get up and go forward with that. I had no doubt. Absolutely no doubt.
And sorry, Alvin, before we go too far ahead, you said that you were in this, or you said basically you were protected by your parents in this bubble. So is there any other people, or is it all Black? Because you mentioned integration just now. So it started getting integrated, but at first it wasn't.
It was completely segregated. I was raised in segregation. My mother worked for white families, and you could work for white businesses. And some of the local businesses treated Black people like they were family. But a lot of people, you were just the help. And I grew up that way. We didn't have a lot of interaction with white people unless we walked to Mr. Benny Rogers' store to buy bread or grits or something like that, or one of the other stores that was a mile or more away. That was about the most interaction we had. But because those people knew my parents, we were never treated badly. They might not call you by your name. They might call you boy or whatever. But, we just sort of shrugged it off and went our way. My mother used to always say, you know how they are. And that was all she would say. She never talked about race. She would just say, you know how they are. And that was it.
So then you go to Yale Summer High School, and so you went by yourself at 16, and you were in Yale for the summer, and
If anybody was prepared for that trip,
uh,
I was. I wanted to leave so badly.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So you were saying, speaking of that preparation, you said something, and I'm gonna try to quote you here. You said that you were innerly preparing for that. What does that mean? Like,
My grandmother said to me that I was all I would ever have.
mm,
So I had to protect what I had.
mm,
So I interpreted that to mean that I had to learn how to take care of myself.
mm,
So from a very early age, I learned how to iron,
mm,
do laundry,
mm-hmm,
cook,
mm,
and be disciplined with myself because I was all I had. And in
mm,
order to be able to get from point A to point B,
mm-hmm,
it was up to me. I didn't have any fallback position.
mm-hmm.
My parents didn't have any money to save me,
Yeah.
So I had to make sure that if I tripped and fell, I had the strength to get up.
It seems to me like your grandmother was a very influential figure in your life,
Oh, my
right?
grandmother loved me.
Mm,
There's no doubt. I was loved. I was a loved child. I know that.
mm,
My mother loved me, but my grandmother really loved me.
mm-hmm.
so then Alvin, you go to Yale, and you go to what was the college you went to, and when did you start going into a career of finance? How did you find that?
Well,
It was
Yale proved to be the wonderful experience that opened my eyes to the world.
Mm.
I think it's Borges who wrote in a story called The Disc, where there's a woodman who lives in a forest and he knows all the trees around him and he knows all the trees beyond those trees and the waters beyond those trees. Well, I knew the trees of Wakulla County and the roads of Wakulla County, but I didn't know much beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
except what I had read, The Count of Monte Cristo in the book, or
Mhm.
Jane Eyre, or
Mhm.
those books. And when I got to Yale, all of a sudden the professors opened up a world for me. There was a professor whose first name was Clyde who gave me an album of Tchaikovsky's, works by Tchaikovsky, which I never heard of. There was Mr. Goldstein, I think he was, the biology teacher. So all of a sudden, for me, there were trees beyond the trees of Wakulla County and worlds beyond that. And I wanted to see those worlds. I really did. After Yale, I then went to Bowdoin College. Why I didn't go to Yale? People often ask me. I didn't really understand what Yale, being an Ivy League school, meant.
Mm,
I really didn't.
mhm,
To me,
mhm,
the most important thing was to get as far away from home as
mhm,
possible, because then I could become me.
mhm,
Mm.
The best gift my parents ever gave me, and I think this was more inadvertent, perhaps, maybe not, was that they never put any expectations on me.
mm,
They wanted me to go to school, to college, and they kind of expected it, but they didn't, their dreams weren't put on me.
Right.
Wow,
So
that's
what
beautiful.
I did had nothing really to do with them. It had everything to do with what I
And
wanted.
they told you that? They actually told you that? They said we have no
No,
expectations in you? Or
no.
it was a conversation that happened
Yeah.
years later.
No, yeah, it was
No, it's a
more,
feeling. It's like, when you have the burden of like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
gotta prove, or they're endowing like this unfulfilled needs
Yeah, yeah,
on you, and then you cannot, fail
yeah.
them, like, and when
yep,
you don't have that on your shoulders, and you're free to explore it and do whatever you want, is what
yes,
I'm hearing.
yes. And that's what I had. I had that freedom to become me. When I say become me, there's a very specific thing.
Mm.
I was not called Alvin at home.
Mm.
I was called Donnell. Everybody who knows me from that period calls me Donnell. It was when I was at Yale and I walked in, and this lady named Alma greeted me at the gates of Branford College. And she said, welcome to Yale, Alvin.
Wow.
And that's when I made the conscious decision that from that day forward, I would become Alvin.
Mm.
And that's part of the journey, actually. Becoming Alvin, it really is.
Yeah.
And who's Alvin? How do you describe Alvin?
I was raised in a very religious environment, very fundamentalist. And I took away many of the feelings of that experience, primarily the music.
Mm.
I have absolutely no guard against Baptist music.
Mhm.
It flows. When I hear it, I can be walking down the street and hear a Baptist or a gospel song, and it just flows right through every part of me. But the only one of the teachings that I took away with me is to treat other people the way you would have them treat you. And so I believe that absolutely. So that started my journey. And everything else was discovering and getting smarter. You also get wiser from your experiences. And I have to say that my life at Bowdoin, which was then an all-male school, historically full of people from New England, white men from New England, was for me an eye-opening experience. But I loved it. I loved it. You know, I always joke and say, going to a waspy New England school was in many ways almost too perfect for me because I was raised by waspy Black people without knowing. It was only when I got up there that I realized, oh, these people are so like my relatives. So a little bit uptight. They don't express themselves very well. I get it. I can go here.
So
Wow.
it seems to me like your eagerness to see and experience what's beyond like your default mode brought you a mindset where you wouldn't like what other people would see as an aggression or as a disadvantage. For you, it was not even a thing to think about.
True.
You were just like, because I'm assuming you had experiences where people were racist to
I did.
you and like, you know, especially in this time, but that's not at all what you highlight from your story.
No, because I don't think I sat in those moments for very long. Another rule my parents had when we were growing up, and I don't think my sisters and brothers, the last four, don't remember this, but we were not allowed to bring stuff into the house. So if something happened that was really bad, you talked about it on the front porch.
Wow. So it was like a sacred space.
And you talked about it and you made a decision on the front porch. And when
Wow.
you walked into the house, we were done with it. We were done with it.
Wow.
And that's still very much a part of my personality. I go for long walks, 4-mile walks, 5-mile walks, or even 13-mile walks when I've had big problems. And once I make a decision, bam, I'm done.
So
The decision is made, no looking back with regret. The decision is done. And whatever happens with it, happens with it. Success or failure, I made the decision.
that's such a blessing. And you're at peace with that because you let go. That's like basically something that came from your parents, like
Yes.
the power of letting go.
And the power of learning to forgive yourself. That I didn't learn until many, many, many years later when I had to go to therapy to learn how to forgive myself because I just thought I had to be perfect. And I had to do everything perfect and I would make mistakes. And then, but they never accumulated, but I could see they were affecting me in a certain way. And then I had to learn to say to myself, you know, you're on a journey. There's no role model for you. There's no path already created for you. You're not becoming a doctor. You're not going to become a lawyer. You don't know what you're going to become. So there's no path. So you have to recognize you're going to make mistakes, forgive yourself, and don't take the incident forward. Take the wisdom that you learn about yourself forward so that you make the next decision with more information and a better understanding of yourself.
That's amazing. Would you say that education or educating yourself was the tool, the weapon to free yourself, to free your spirit?
Yes, education was the key tool. In high school, I graduated at the top of my class. When I went to Yale the first year, now remember, when I went to Yale, I had never seen a movie.
Mm,
I had never been to a restaurant.
wow.
I had probably eaten at only 2 families' houses other than my
Mm,
relatives, right? So when I arrived with Yale, I was pretty naive. I remember they used to have this picture of me, and it still says in the catalog, "Hi, I'm Alvin. I'm so young and innocent." That's how, I mean, it was just all over me, I guess. And I think that all of that sort of gave me an openness to things
mhm,
and a desire to just learn and absorb and learn and absorb
mhm,
and learn and absorb. And so Yale, I improved at Yale, and then at Bowdoin, what Bowdoin gave me was something I would be forever thankful for. We had distribution requirements. So I had to take English course, math course, foreign language, economics courses, sociology courses. So you learn how to think in different ways.
mm,
And I didn't realize I was learning that at the
mhm,
time. And so a psychology paper isn't going to be written like an English paper or a chemistry paper.
mhm,
And so at Bowdoin, without even knowing it, I learned how to acquire an elastic intelligence.
wow.
And it
That's
allowed
beautiful.
me to to be able to expand. So today I can write about financial markets in a way that people can understand, but I also can write about art reviews.
Mm,
I can write about autobiographical pieces. And I think the commonality is the sort of clarity of my prose, but the style within each one is different. But that came from Bowdoin. So the education Bowdoin gave me has served me throughout my life. When I went to small New England schools, you all probably don't even know this, but in those days you had to have a carryover sport. You know what that is?
no.
So when you went to college, you had to learn a sport, tennis, squash, swimming, something that you could then carry over into life that would enable you to maintain your physical being and stay
Mhm.
in good health.
Oh, oh, that's fantastic.
Guess what?
They should still do that.
I never got a carryover sport.
Oh, you did it? How'd you get out of it?
I couldn't swim. I couldn't play tennis. I couldn't play squash.
Wow.
I just didn't have those abilities. I just
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
And did it bother me? Not one bit. Not
Yeah.
one bit. And so I always say that I graduated. I'm sure that the then president of Roger Howell at Bowdoin must have given me some exemption because my carryover sport is an elasticity of intelligence. That's
Mm.
all I have.
Great.
But that's a beautiful concept. Do you think that that boy that was portrayed as the innocent boy, as you said,
Mhm.
right? That image of that boy, that innocence, that level of curiosity was one of the triggers for that elasticity that you found?
Yes, absolutely. That curiosity was the trigger because my college advisor and I used to joke that I had more drop ad classes. So I'd take a course, learn a little about it, go to another course. And I would read so many different things
Wow.
because I was just curious to
You were
know.
curious. You
I
wanted
would,
to keep learning.
yeah, I
Wow.
wanted to know. I wanted to see.
Wow.
And it was like magic. I
Mm.
found it very inspiring. When I was at Yale, I used to wake up and say, every day is a new day.
Mm.
Today
Oh,
is a
great.
new day.
Great.
And I said that so many times.
Yeah.
And I wish sometimes when I think about those periods of time, I just keep wondering, where did this all come from in this little bitty
Yeah.
kid?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was just there, it was in me. And I
Wow.
think I was hungry. I was hungry for a lot more
Wow.
in life.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Alvin, can we go back to the part about learning to forgive yourself? You
Yes.
were putting a lot of pressure on yourself to be perfect all the time, but did you feel as you were growing up that the pressure to be perfect was coming externally, like you as a Black man had to work even harder or get everything absolutely correct, or you would be treated a little differently for your mistakes, or did you feel
I
guarded?
I honestly think that it was self-imposed later on.
Mm.
Okay.
I think that here's an this will lead us into this discussion. When you don't know a system very well, and you don't have anybody explain that system to you, then you put together ideas about how you think that system may work.
Mm.
But you don't really know how it works,
Mhm.
and nobody explains it to you. So as I approached my graduation from Bowdoin, I had never thought about what life would be after going to school and getting a degree. I had never thought. So I thought I need to get a job and work hard at the job and be good at the job and not fail at the job. That's when that need to be perfect came in, because I didn't really know what was required to be successful. I thought if I played by the rules.
So it was actually when you tamed the curiosity and the freedom of that innocent boy, when this rigid corset of I gotta be perfect, perfect, perfect came about.
Yep, it
Wow.
did. And it became my Achilles heel for a number of years.
Wow.
And I recognized that I was becoming anxious, making mistakes. It was during this period, which I'm very open about, that I got into credit card debt. This is how deluded I was. At the time, I used to drive from Florida, where I was living in Miami, up to Maine every summer to visit friends. And I thought, well, shouldn't I have a credit card for every gas station along the way? Isn't that wacky?
Yeah.
But I got a credit card for every gas station along the way. And I thought, well, that's how this stuff works. Right? So again, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I got myself into credit card debt. So I had to take a job. I was teaching school at the time. I took a job in the men's furnishing department of a department store. Men's furnishing were belts, underwear, socks, and handkerchiefs. And I recognized that I had started to become very sharp. Very sharp. I didn't tolerate much. And I had become angry. I felt life was letting me down. I played by the rules. I was playing by the rules.
How old were you?
In my early 20s, 22, 23. And I said, I'm playing by the rules. Why isn't life delivering it? And so I started to go to therapy.
Wow.
And I thought I had to have somebody to talk to. And I don't know how I even chose a therapist, but I did. And I always remember, and I can hardly say this without crying, because it's one of those revelations that change your life. When the therapist said to me, so Alvin, what makes you think that by playing by the rules, the world owes you success? Okay.
Wow.
Still makes me cry.
Wow.
I think about it to this day.
Wow.
It hurt, but it was the truth.
Yeah.
It was the truth.
Yeah.
And that statement changed everything for me. Everything. I thought, well, why am I doing this? Why am I taking this job, doing these things, which I'm not happy with? I felt as if it was all just narrowing me into a person I didn't want to be. And that gave me the freedom. That freed me up. So from that, many other things happened. But the major change was when my college roommate from Bowdoin College, Ed Fleur, took over his father's Wall Street training firm. Now, ask me, did I know anything about money? No. Ask me, did I even balance a checkbook? Sorta, kinda.
Well, based on your thesis of credit cards, I'm assuming that it wasn't that accurate.
Exactly. But I knew that Ed was my good friend, and Ed really cared for me. And I knew that Ed, since we'd known each other in college, was really his father used to say that we were like brothers, and we still are. And so I took the job.
Mm.
And he said, you can learn this stuff. You can learn this stuff. And so it turns out that it was another one of those gifts from the universe, the way people say it today, because I had to write about quantitative information. How do stocks work? What are dividends? What are interest rates? All of that information, it turned out, suited me so well, but I could also apply all of the stuff I had learned by reading literature. I could create better examples that were simple, that people could understand, because I had been an English major at Bowdoin. So it was a blending, so I could use both sides of my brain in this area. And I was not playing by anybody's rules because it was a small family-owned company. They were building it up with the idea they were going to sell it eventually anyway. And we were in an industry that was growing. There were no formal training programs at most Wall Street firms in those days. And Leo Fleur Inc., Ed's father, was at the very forefront of that. He owned the company, Leo Fleur Incorporated. And so with that, we started to write these training manuals for all of these firms that people did not know. I was learning about bonds, mutual funds, stocks, preferred stocks, options, the SEC, the NASD. It was like being back in school. And I found it so fantastic. I was absorbing this stuff so fast. It amazed me. It just amazed me. But again, I was not locked into a corporate world with that structure. And that, again, another one of those moments that changed my life.
And you went from the kid who wanted a card for every gas station to now an adult who is teaching people how to balance their books because you became an expert in finances.
I became an expert in personal finance, partly out of my own experience, but then helping my friends who also got into financial trouble because I recognized that personal discipline was really a part of it.
So it wasn't that common, like back then at your age, that people would go and seek therapy and go to a therapist. And
no, it was not. But I used to be driven to school every day by a wonderful lady who lived on Miami Beach called Arlene Schleyer. And Arlene told me about therapy. We would talk in the car, and she said, maybe you need to talk to a therapist. So I found one, and the therapist was really helpful to me. And I think I chose to go to a therapist because I needed somebody who didn't know me. Somebody who could be completely objective about me and learn me and help me that way. That was more useful to me than somebody who knew me. So that's why I went. And I sacrificed to make those payments, but they were some of the most useful things I've ever. I always say that therapy was the most useful gift I've ever given myself.
And going back to our previous conversation, you were saying that then you started like at your own expense, like becoming very finance savvy, and then you were helping your friends around.
Yes. And that was because I decided that once I learned and got myself out of debt, and I recognized the key to my problem, again, the result of therapy, that money was hardwired to a lot of my self-worth.
Wow.
And I used the acquisitions of things to validate that self-worth.
Wow.
But isn't that like a common thing in many of us? Like,
well, I mean, that's
I can relate to that. Like at some
everybody,
point,
because
like,
it's the part of the rules of the system, as you were saying. It's part of the rules of the system.
Yes.
That's how you supply to the black hole, so to speak, that we all have inside. If we cannot, fix certain things, well, let's get a new car.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Let's go and buy that new bag from Hermes.
Well, and it's about perception, right? And so success is not about what you're doing and how you feel about yourself, but what you can show.
And so once I had that revelation and I moved to New York City, my financial situation improved because then I became aware of my own self-discipline and how do I give myself enough of what I want to make myself happy, but not have my happiness defined by people who don't know me. I didn't need to have the same things that people have. People just say, "Don't you want to own a car?" No, in the truth, I don't like driving, so why would I want to own a car? Or do you want to do this? No, I don't particularly like that. And there was a period of time in my life in which all I could afford to spend per week in eating out was $25. And I still remember that. And I would take $25 out. And when I hit the limit, that would be it. And then I would make my excuse and leave.
Hmm.
So I would almost never have dinner with anybody because I couldn't afford a big dinner. So I'd go out and have maybe a drink and a snack, and then I'd leave.
Yeah.
And I felt fine about that. So I didn't feel the need for pressure from other people.
Right.
So you said something that to me is like, it's almost like a revelation. It's a gift that you're giving, not just to us, but to everybody, everybody who's listening and watching this. You said that you realize that, I'm trying to quote you, but I'm never gonna I'm gonna paraphrase here, but you said something like, you realize that you part of the financial success is wired to your self-value.
Yes, the amount of
Can
money
you
you earn is very much wired to what you think of yourself and how you use that money to validate that self-worth.
How do you realize that? How do you come to that conclusion? I mean, it was just therapy or experience.
Getting into financial trouble was part of it.
Mhm.
Definitely having too much credit card debt and having all of the stuff that you couldn't turn into cash. And why did I need this Armani jacket? Why did I need Wedgwood china, the first china pattern I bought out of school? Right? It was a little insane, but I was on that path. And when I realized that by reflection, by sitting there and honestly asking myself, why did I do that? What was I trying to prove to myself? And what was I trying to prove to the world? And that's when I came to understand that. And that has been in my life since my 20s. So since then, I am very good at selecting what I want that will give me the longest term satisfaction. And anything else I can let go. I can let it go and never have to think about it ever again.
Let's go now a little bit forward. You're working with the Floors, and you're living in New York City.
Yes.
And was it the 80s? We have the AIDS epidemic.
Yes.
Tell us your experience and what that was like going through.
So I was living in North Carolina at the time, and my college roommate from Bowdoin, Ed Fleur, took over his father's Wall Street training firm. And on December 7th, 1982, I flew to New York City to start a job at the company, helping to develop training programs about the financial markets for all the companies that were implementing training programs and to teach licensing examination. So this was a totally new door for me, and it was exciting. But one of the aspects of my personality has always been, yes, that's one side, but I also like to have friends who are in another side of life. So I had all these friends who were in advertising, the arts, friends who were involved in music. So after work, if I had a really hard day, I would go out, and there used to be a drag bar in the 40s on the West Side. And I would go and have a drink. In those days, I only had one drink at this drag bar, because it was just like, you go there and you couldn't stay in a Wall Street mindset in a drag bar. And I used theater the same way. I would go to theater, and I would see a lot of theaters. And in those days, I had to travel to teach. So Sundays, we always traveled. So I could go out only on Saturday nights, only, and dance. And I love to dance. And so I would go out. And of course, things happen and you meet people. And at first, you heard about AIDS, but you didn't know people who had AIDS. And then I remember a friend of mine from California was in town, and we went to see his friend who lived off Sheridan Square. Handsome man. And he was not feeling well. He had a fever. He said, but we went out And then I saw him 6 months later. He had Kaposi sarcoma
Mm.
on his body. And then, in my case, a couple of people that I slept with
Mm.
came down with AIDS. And then that's when it got really close.
Mm.
But I think the incident that really just left me focusing on other people and how do I protect myself at the same time was when my close friend Drew Dreeland contracted AIDS, HIV. Of all the deaths,
Mhm.
and I would say somewhere around 40 of my friends from that period died.
Wow.
I still have many of their names in an address book. I didn't throw the address book away. I won't throw it away. But when Drew died, that was the one that really hurt because Drew and I had become such close friends. He loved opera. He introduced me to going to the opera. On Friday nights, we would do what we called an at-home. He'd say, "What you doing on Friday night?" I'd say, "I'm not doing anything. What you're doing?" And he said, "Well, let's look in our refrigerator. And whoever had the most food in the refrigerator, that's where we ate."
Mm.
So we would pick up things and we'd eat each other houses, and we traveled a couple of times together. And he met this guy, and he had fell in love with this guy, and all of a sudden Drew was HIV positive, and he was getting ill and getting more ill, and I was unbelievably angry at his partner. I was irrationally angry at his partner, and he knew this. And he said to me, in one of our many conversations, he said to me, "Alvin, you can't be solely angry with him because I was there too.
Mm.
I made a decision
Mm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you love me enough not to be angry with me."
Mm.
And I did love him enough.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
And I learned forgiveness that
Mm.
day.
Wow.
Still, I miss Drew.
Mm.
Think about Drew. He's right at St. Michael's
Wow.
over here
Mm.
on Center Park West. That was a lesson. That was a hard one. It's still hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What?
When you think of all the people you lost, there's always that one.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that I joined the board of the New York City AIDS Memorial.
Mm.
Mm.
I'm a board member
Mm.
because I can't ever imagine a time when I'll find a place for that loss. I can't imagine it, really.
Mm.
I can't.
Wow.
I don't talk about it very often
Mm.
because it's just there. And I have to say, it's ironic in a funny way because I'm a person who always says to people, time will heal it all.
Mm.
You will get over it. Time works for you. No. There are things that I can place, but I can't go near a place where I placed it. I
Mm.
can't go near it. I can't. And so it just sits there. I'm
Mm.
aware of it. Once a year, I go over to St. Michael's and
Mm.
see the column period.
Mm.
But, so that period was very difficult. And it changed my behavior. After that, I was probably celibate for about 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Well-
if somebody approached me about anything, it was like, it was like this, like Edward Monk's the
Right,
painting,
right,
the scream.
Well, I mean, thank you for sharing, Alvin. I'm sorry to ask, but I ask it because I think there are generations now where that history is kind of even being forgotten. I don't think people know the scale of deaths that were occurring, the fear of not knowing what's causing it. I mean, and there is a parallel to when COVID first happened. I mean, I imagine when COVID had just happened, it kind of brought back some of those memories of like not knowing what's causing and
The difference was that contracting HIV was a death sentence in those days.
Yes, it was.
You knew you were going to die.
Yeah.
With COVID, you had a chance of recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the difference for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think today, I don't think people can imagine what it was like to see a friend today looking healthy and 6 months, 8 months later, see them waste away to nothing and have no hope, to see them covered with lesions and have no hope. But also people can't imagine when you don't know what causes this, how do you negotiate within yourself the emotional stamina required to see this friend and walk over and hold them?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just embracing them.
Yeah.
It was holding them.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Right.
Yeah.
And you didn't know.
So that was a lot of distance to negotiate.
Yeah.
Right.
And when they had been abandoned by their families, going,
The stigma.
yep, and staying in the hospital with them.
Yeah.
Staying in the hospital with them. I remember a friend of mine named Paul, and he had this roommate in the hospital. He used to wear this very famous ring. And Paul was in those days in the last throes. And this guy said, I love those rings, and I'll give you money for those rings. And Paul gave away the rings. And I walked in and said, where are your rings? He said, oh, that guy who was here gave me money for the rings, and I could use the money. I just thought to myself, wow, he's giving away everything because he knows. And his relatives never came for him. Never came for him.
Wow.
It was a difficult time. But when you survive that, again, I try to take not the trauma of the experience forward, but the wisdom of the experience. And the wisdom is that you never know what can happen to you. It's not just from sexual activity. It could be cancer.
COVID, it could be cancer. It could be anything.
Everything. So
I lost my best friend to cancer in a matter of 6 months, and he was an athlete. He was an athlete. He was one of the best soccer players I've ever met in my life. And in a matter of 6 months, I saw the transformation in his body and everything, and how, I mean, the rest of the people, they were continuing with their lives, and he was not. And from being playing soccer, in fields, to not even being able to walk, and losing his hair and everything. And then all of a sudden, in a period of 6 months, he was gone. So those kind of experiences really teach you that we need to value the now. We need to give now, love, appreciation, friendship, whatever we have. We need to enjoy the coffee and matcha and the conversation we're having now.
Yes. And you have to also appreciate you and you and you, and always make sure you embrace and support that person so that they know you are there.
Yes.
They must know you are there.
Yes. In that regard, I want to ask you something. Forgiveness. Because you were talking about forgiveness. You mentioned forgiveness before, and you also mentioned forgiveness with your friend, with Drew. What is forgiveness?
Forgiveness is recognizing that you are fallible and you're going to make judgments, say wrong things, do wrong things. You need to know how to ask other people for forgiveness, to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I hope you can forgive me. But you also have to forgive yourself. And by forgiving yourself, hopefully you stop that cycle. You don't go there again. You don't offer that pain or that internal bitterness to somebody else. You move forward with it. I always think, despite losing all those friends, I'm a better person for it, because I think I'm a much more humane person. I'm much less harsh than I could have been. I think of Alvin before therapy. some of the things I might have said, but I would
Mm.
never say them now. I could, because I'm always aware of the humanity of every person who's standing in front of me.
Mm.
Alvin, so going to talking about humanity and also about like making the most of the time you have, knowing that anything can happen. Now, later in your life, you're, I would say you've changed what your focus is in your career. Could you tell us about like what are the things that really excite you and why you've taken up the mantle that you have?
When I started this journey, I had nothing, no safety net, just me. And I think along the way, I came to the awareness of what the freedom that having a financial safety net could give me in terms of making my own decisions, that I would have some breathing room.
Mm.
So if I lost my job, which happened,
Mm-hmm.
I could take a breath and make a decision. Or I could reach a point in my life where I could do something that I've always wanted to do. And I've been lucky enough to be able to save enough money and invest enough money so that I could take a chance on something very different. So when I started working at the BBC, people always think, oh, you're earning a lot of money. The BBC is a government-owned organization. They don't pay a lot of money. Nothing like you would earn in television in America. But I could afford to take that risk. I could afford to learn how television worked, how radio worked. I could learn that. When that career came to an end, or more accurately, slowed down, because I still do radio programs for the BBC and an occasional appearance, I recognized that I had gained a set of skills beyond just being on camera, being able to write about personal finance, that I could probably produce a
Mm.
movie or write a movie
Mm.
or come up with an idea. So after the podcast, Driving the Green Book, did so well, and that was my idea, totally my idea. And after I connected to Macmillan and they helped me produce it and it won all those awards, I began to think of myself as a creative.
Mm.
Back to that little boy who had
Mm.
all of those dreams and ideas. And I decided that I could take this period and just pursue those ideas. And this is where that famous James Baldwin quote, which I will read to you,
Mm-hmm.
comes into play. It says, "A journey is called that because you cannot know what you will discover on the journey, what you will do with what you find, or what you find will do to you."
Mm.
Mm.
And when I found the Green Book, it has opened the door for so many possibilities. The short film that Sarah and I did together, which has now won 2 Best Documentary Awards. The film I'm doing about the Lorraine Motel, where Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. This film will look at the entire history of the hotel. That has come from the Green Book. Other projects
Mm-hmm.
are emerging. So I feel as if all of a sudden, during this last phase of my life, that I gave myself the freedom that I had as a little boy
Mm.
to just think and dream.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it by giving myself a safety net.
Mm.
So this is interesting because you mentioned that back in the day when you were in
Wakulla County, yeah.
Wakulla County, you were dreaming of going away to find Alvin, to find who is Alvin. And it seems to me that you're now completing the cycle because you're going back there now
Mm-hmm.
as an Alvin to find out that little kid, right? And to reconnect with that
With the
part of
joy, with the
you
freedom,
that,
yeah.
that you left behind, probably.
You're absolutely right. The last BBC program I did was called Alvin Hall's Other America.
Mm.
I went back to Wakulla County
Mm.
and interviewed my 4 best friends from
Wow.
elementary school.
Wow.
Annie Jean Hicks, my cousin, Patricia Roberts, and Francilla Hill. We've been friends all these years. And I was able to talk to my cousins, talk to relatives, talk to people who have known me since I was a little boy. And in those wonderful things that happen sometimes, I would be interviewing them, and they couldn't quite figure out who they're talking to. So they think, why do I know you? I would go, well, I was born here. Who are your people? I said, well, you probably know my mother. And they'd say, who? I said, oh, Mariah Lee. Oh, Mariah Lee. Oh, my God, you're Donnell. Oh, my God, Donnell.
Wow.
So they all know me as Donnell.
Wow.
But when I go back as Alvin, it's so interesting. And it's interesting because some of them can't call me Alvin.
Of course.
I will always be
Right.
Donnell to them.
Yeah.
And that's just so wonderful. My babysitter, Dot, died about a year ago. And when I would go down to visit her at home, she would always, in the summer, be sitting on the front porch, fanning, rocking back and forth. And I always remember one day she was sitting out there in just a pair of sort of pedal pusher shorts and just her bra, because it was a hot day. And she just said, boy, come up here and sit beside me. You've seen a bra before. Right? Donnell, I know you've seen a bra before. Right? So that's the way they are. So you're very much correct. In many ways, I'm going back to that place, that touchstone, to find the ideas that were so important to me then. Those that launched me, and hoping that in this last phase, that whatever wisdom the full circle was intended to depart to me.
And you froze the eyes pretty well.
Yeah. I did.
I have a question
Yes.
for you. Well, I have actually 2 questions related to the Green Book. And, going along with the quote that you just read for us, do you think you found the Green Book, or the Green Book found you?
It was a combination of both. I was flying to London on a plane, reading a book about traveling in America, and there was a note in the book, a little sidebar that mentioned the Green Book. And I thought, I've never heard this. It's called the Negro Motorist Green Book, used to help Black people travel in America during segregation. I thought, well, the reason I hadn't heard of it because we were too poor to have a car, and we didn't drive any place we couldn't get there in like 4 or 5 hours. So when my uncle took us, so I decided to learn about the Green Book when I got back from London. So I went up to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and they have the largest collection in America. At the same time, in Wales, in the UK, a young producer named Jeremy Grange had just read about the Green Book in a publication. He, reading about it, remembered my work on the BBC and called up my agent and said, I have a project I think Alvin Hall will be interested in.
Wow.
It's the Green Book. And so my agent said, can I give him your number? I said, yeah, give him my number. He called up and told me about it. And it was like, yeah, my name is on this. So it really was like a combination of the two. This guy in the UK and me in America. And what really was touching for me about it was he came up with a simple road trip idea through time and space. We would start the road trip using the Green Book in Wakulla County, and then we drive from my past into today using the historic civil rights route, going through Birmingham, Montgomery, Jackson, Memphis, and ending at the time in Ferguson, Missouri, where Michael Brown had recently been killed by the police.
Wow.
So it was a singularly brilliant idea to do it that way. And getting back to your point, it was all about going back home and starting there, because there was something about starting in that place that opened up a world for me. I didn't even know that there was a Green Book location in Tallahassee, Florida, that we drove by all the time. When my uncle took us to town to buy groceries, to buy dry goods, we drove past this place all the time. Had no idea.
Wow.
Wow.
And I was going to ask, kind of going off what Gay was saying, whether you found the Green Book or the Green Book found you, but were you already thinking at this point that you wanted to cover topics in history, or really use your platform and your voice to educate Americans about the history that unfolded before on segregation or topics along that?
No, I had not thought about that at the time. I had done several shows for the BBC, radio programs primarily, that had done very well. After Katrina, Wall Street 1 Year On, uh, Black music, intellectual property and copyright, um, Poorer Than Their Parents. I'd been doing all of this work for the BBC. But this particular show opened up my eyes in a way that was both personal, but also I saw my life in a different way. Key to this is an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art called One Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence Great Migration Series. It's a series of 60 paintings, 30 are at MoMA, 30 are at the Phillips Collection. And the Great Migration took place from 1910 to 1970, during which over 6 million African Americans left the rural South and moved north for new opportunities. Little did I know, when I left Wakulla County and went to Yale in 68 and then Bowdoin in 70, that I was a part of the Great Migration.
Wow.
I did not know that
Wow.
until that exhibition.
Wow.
And
That's amazing. That's
isn't it?
incredible.
I didn't know it.
So here's my second question, or the second section of the question that I have for you. Going along with that, either, or you said it was a combination. You found it, and the Green Book also found you, and then you start seeing all these different, synchronicities, if you want to
Yes,
call them that
perfect.
way. Why? The question is why. What's the meaning behind? If you had to give a meaning to it, what is it?
I have always remained very open to new ideas and new forces. I think, and I have always believed, as I've gotten older and had more experience with things, that luck is in our lives every day, but we're often distracted and don't see it. The story that illustrates this in my own life. I'd flown to London, was meeting a friend of mine who's a pilot for British Airways, and we went to the then Photographers Gallery located on Leicester Square. While there, we met this young man, Jonathan Drury, looking at pictures. We then went out to a pub. Jonathan invited his girlfriend along, who was an American at the time. Richard Clark invited his girlfriend along, and we all went out. At the end of the evening, Jonathan said, "Alvin Hall, you should be on television. You're really funny, and you know a lot about investing. You should be on television." And I said, "No, thank you." I had just signed up the New York Stock Exchange as a client. I had just signed up Lehman Brothers as a client. I had a lot of work. Dean Witter was my client. I would occasionally travel internationally. I had a lot of work. I said no. He asked me again. I said no. I told this story at a party, and my good friend Susan Stevenson said, "What? What's wrong with you? People would give their right on for that opportunity. Get up those stairs and call that guy now and tell him you'll do that audition." I did the audition. My agreement with him was that I would write one of the 3 audition pieces on derivative securities. And so I flew over and did the audition. 9 months later, I got the call at my apartment that I had been chosen to do the first personal finance show in prime time
Wow.
on the BBC.
Wow.
Amazing.
And I said no to that opportunity. After that happened, I basically decided I had to be more open to things.
Yeah.
Maybe, right? Maybe.
And so I think that what's happening now is really in many ways a
Yeah.
culmination of that openness.
Yeah.
You know, I learned that there was luck. I mean, so many wonderful things happened to me.
Yeah.
Jay-Z was doing his first European tour.
Wow.
And the BBC wanted to cover it. And a wonderful man named Tony Phillips, who knew my work, said, I think you should do this show. You should interview Jay. So Jay was rehearsing at Royal Albert Hall. And so I interviewed Jay-Z.
Wow.
And we got along. It's supposed to be a 20-minute interview. It ended up being like a 40-minute interview.
Yeah.
And then we did another interview with him
Yeah.
at his Rockaware place on Broadway. And then I met him and we went out when he owned the New York Nets. They were in New Jersey. And I remember we went out in the Maybach, right? And it was wild. And then I thought I was going to get a ride back in the Maybach. It was like Cinderella. No, you go out and get the bus, right?
Wow.
I had to leave my little Ferragamos right in the Nets Stadium. But, you know, that's another, you know, and I went on to win the Wincott Award for that show.
Wow.
So these
But is it luck? Is it really luck? Or now in retrospect, when you see it?
I'm better at recognizing it. That's the wisdom that you take forward. You become more skillful at recognizing this is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I may not succeed at it, but I do have the self-discipline to be able to work hard to make it, to realize
when those opportunities were coming your way, did you feel something? Did you feel something in your stomach? Did you feel?
Yes, I felt that something beyond me was saying to me, you have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I followed it. And since I started to do the Lorraine Motel film, we started filming just before my birthday in June 2024. Every week since we started filming, something magical has happened. Every week, somebody decides to give us money. Somebody we've been trying to locate suddenly appears. We discover an archive of information about the Lorraine Motel we didn't know existed. We're interviewing Eddie Floyd, and he breaks into Knock on Wood, sounding exactly the way he did on the single when it was released in the 60s. Magic. And I finally had to say to myself that there's a power beyond me making this happen. And I have to remain every day open to the power of the possibilities, that whatever spirit, whatever force is guiding this, it feels very similar to what happened to me when I was over in the UK.
Wow.
I have come to understand that I just have to be open and watchful. And when my intuition says, take the risk, take the risk.
Go for it.
Go for it. Yep, go for it. Because the one thing I am confident in, and after all these years, I do have the discipline. I do. I will stick to it.
Yeah.
I may not
Discipline has been an important thing in your life from that back in those days when you had the discipline to learn how to cook, how to do your own stuff, like how to study so you could get along in life. So that's like an important element in your life for like that would be something that define your success, like your discipline.
Yes. Yep. When I ran my own little company, a little consulting company, I never was late for a job. I was always there on time. I made sure the materials got there on time. Even when I was sick, I would show up because I did the job.
Alvin, you know, you grew up very, what type of Christianity? No, Christian.
Baptist.
Was it Baptist or
Baptist,
very Baptist?
Fundamental Baptist.
Fundamental Baptist. So going back to discovering or being open to the possibilities and feeling guided by something. What do you believe in today now?
Oh, there's a song that's called Just a Little While to Stay Here, Just a Little While to Wait. I think that my belief is we do only have a little while here.
Mm.
And we have to make the best of that time while we're here. I play that song many Sunday mornings when I'm feeling discouraged. It's the music that really embodies the faith that I take forward. And what I take is not the literal word of the Bible, but the feelings that they bring to me. I mean, if you were at my house some Sunday mornings, you'd hear me playing this gospel music because I need that uplift. I need that to go forward to the next day, the next week, or the next month. And it sustains me. I always say those beliefs, the feeling that comes from that music is very sustaining for me. And I still live by that one rule. I treat others the way I would have them treat me.
The golden rule.
I do believe that.
Yeah. So tell us what's next. What are you working on now? What are you excited about?
I'm excited by the Lorraine Motel movie. We're working on that with an award-winning director, Sam Pollard. And we will soon be able to see a rough cut. I still have to raise the money, but
it will come.
It will come. Exactly.
Magic has been coming every week, so
exactly.
Don't be surprised if by next week you get that phone call.
Yes, it will. And if it does, I will call you and let you know.
Yeah, exactly. You can take this if you want.
And I'm excited by the memoir, actually. I decided that part of this last phase is that I should apply to writing residences. I've never done this before. And I applied for the first two. I got rejected. I fully expected that. But, rejection doesn't stop me. I figure if you get rejected one time, you just apply someplace else.
Well, in retrospect, it looks like it has never been a stopper in your life, right?
I didn't think about that at the time. So I've decided to apply for these writing residences and use that as a place where I can have time just to focus on the memoir. But also I'm giving myself, I think, the room I need to get it right. So this coming April, I'm actually going to be down in Wakulla County for 3 weeks. And that time will be solely devoted to writing and talking with people that I know so that I can get that voice in my head. There's a voice that I'm looking for. And I'm almost there. I had it the other night when I had a dream about me being a little boy. It's almost there, but it's not quite right yet. So once I get that voice right, and once I'm among the people I grew up with, I'll find that voice. I'll hear it, and that will be the thing. You can actually hear that voice if you listen to my recent radio program. I'm interviewing a lady named Dolores Harvey about my mother, and she says about herself, "I'm old and broke down, and I can't sing anymore, but I'm going to sing this song for you, Donnell." And she does.
Wow.
She sings a song called Jesus Knows. And it's a song I've known all my life. But her version is like the last days of Billie Holiday.
Oh my God.
Billie Holiday did this beautiful album called Lady in Satin.
Yeah.
With the voices shot. But the musicality is there. The understanding is there.
The connection with it.
When you hear Dolores Harvey do Jesus Knows on my podcast, you will know everything I'm looking for.
Wow.
By the way, I've never gotten past that song and listened to that podcast.
Wow. One last question. Well, before we get to our very last question, the question is, if you have Donald in front of you today, looking at you, sitting in front of you, what would you tell him?
Never lose your sense of the possibilities of the world, beyond the world that you know. I know New York City, but I went to Istanbul for the first time when I was a little boy, and we had no money. I would go to town to the 5 and 10 cent store, and I wouldn't buy candy. I'd buy those little Viewmaster slides. And some of the places I bought were Siam, Burma, and Istanbul. And I would sit in the backyard and create these stories, walking around these places, just create stories. Did I know what these places were? No. But I created stories. So 2 years ago for Christmas, I decided to go to Istanbul for the first time. Back then it was called Constantinople. I never left Istanbul the entire time. Walking down the street, it was like snapshots were coming back to me. I never want to lose that wonder. And I hope that Donnell never becomes so detached that he loses that wonder of the possibilities of the world beyond the one that he knows.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then last question. The last question, you know, the show is coffee, matcha, and soul.
So, yeah.
What is the soul? How do you define soul?
Soul is that part of you that connects to other people, whether it's your family, whether it's music. It's that part of you that can sustain you through adversity, that can help you understand somebody else, that you can sit alone and in quiet and hear, whether it's a classical music piece or an R&B or rock, and it just moves you. But it takes you out of your world into another world. To me, that's what soul has always been. I think about the first time I heard Sam and Dave singing, if something is wrong with my baby, something is wrong with me. I think of the transcendent experience of seeing Patti LuPone on the closing night of Gypsy, or the 10th anniversary performance of A Chorus Line, or going to see Leontine Price's last performance in Aida at the Met. Those were all events that spoke to my soul. They spoke to the depth of me, everything that I am. To me, that's soul.
That's beautiful.
Amazing.
Hey, can I tell you one more story? I don't know how you're
Please.
going to use it, but I'll tell you this.
Okay.
So earlier we were talking about how my parents launched me, gave me the freedom to go out into the world. And I didn't feel the need to go back home regularly. I told my mother at 19 I would not come back for Thanksgiving or Christmas for the rest of my life. And I didn't. I'd come back at off seasons, but when everybody was home, no, that wasn't going to work for me. So I didn't. But I stayed in touch. You know, my parents would often, my grandmother in particular, if there was a plane crash in the world, I'd get a call from my grandmother. Donnell, oh, mama, yeah, what's up? Oh, I just called to make sure you're okay. I'm fine. I just heard about that plane crash. I want to make sure you weren't on it. Well, if I was on it, how would I be answering the phone? Because they never knew where I was in the world, because I never told them where I was in the world, because I thought they were just worried. And so when my grandmother was dying, she had old age wasting syndrome. And as I said, my grandmother loved me, and I knew that. But I also know myself, and she knew me. So I flew back home when we were told that there was nothing else they could do. I flew back home, and I said to her, this is our weekend. We must say everything we need to say this weekend, because I'm never coming back. I'll come back for your funeral. I'll come back to Do what you want with the grave, but I'm never coming back to watch you die. And she said, you always had such a tender heart. Always. I know you couldn't do it. That was that. And we made our peace. And that was it. And I left.
Wow.
Yeah. She gave me that as a gift. She let me leave. Because I couldn't watch her die.
Wow.
What a gift.
And you're now giving that gift to all of us and to so many people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Think about it. Seriously, you're doing that. You're
Sharing.
that's your part of your legacy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here and sharing your story with us, Alvin, and
Yes.
the audience.
Thank
This
you.
was amazing.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, last tears.
Oh my God. We should have tissues here. Let me give you.
I know, we have to have tissues here, yes.
Thank you for everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So now you know some of what's going to be in the memoir.
Yeah. I know.
Not all of it, but
Oh my God.